Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. So,
Right.
welcome to the reading panel today. And we have all sorts of fun things that are going to be read today. And Chloe is going first.
Yes, I am. I'll do a brief little introduction about myself. My name is Chloe Spencer. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a bisexual author. I primarily write sci-fi. I'm currently in the midst of writing my first YA novel, which is called Monster Sona, and it's about a girl who literally turns into a monster and a road trip across the United States. So it's a little bit of, so this is a work in progress right now, so it's a little bit rough, but I hope that you guys enjoy. There's descriptions of blood, of course, and fire, as monsters tend to cause fires. So I'll just jump right into it. So, day 10, early morning. The heavy iron chains almost slipped through my bloody hands. Carefully, I tightened my grip around the cleanest edge and slowly began to wrap the metal strands around Aspen's sleeping body. I don't know how long these are going to hold her, or if they're going to hold her at all. Time is of the essence here, and I don't have much of it. I take a step back to examine my handiwork. All I've done is wrap the chains around and around her torso. I don't even have a lock to secure it with. My only option is to try to tie a knot in the chains. I crouch down to try again, but the ends are too short. I won't be able to tie them in a knot unless I unravel some of the chain and try again. I look at Aspen, still sleeping in the chair. Blood is splattered across her face like sun-kissed freckles. Her blonde hair is sticky and stained crimson red, dripping onto the floor below. Yet she isn't as soaked as I am. From my head to my toes, I'm covered in the reeking iron stench of the two men that were slaughtered. Waves of nausea overcome me, and as I gag, I clap my hand over my mouth to stop the bile from escaping my body. My head is reeling, and my vision blurs with tears as I struggle to regain control. Outside, Tigger paws at the door, and his barks grow urgent, demanding to be let inside. But I can't let him inside for this. It's far too dangerous. I stare at Aspen for a few moments before finally turning my back to her. Laying on the table in front of me is a small syringe filled with some strange neon orange liquid. It seems to glow in the darkness of the shed. The syringe itself is surprisingly unthreatening, short and stubby, kind of like the ones that they use for the flu vaccines. But that liquid, I've never seen anything that screams danger louder than this. But I have no choice. It's either me or her. Picking up the syringe, I turn my back to Aspen and I jump back, startled. She is already awake, staring at me with those unsettling forest green eyes. She grimaces at me and tugs at her restraints. Huh. Looks like I need to have more confidence in my knot tying skills. I can see Aspen's body shaking with fear, yet her voice remains firm as she speaks. Riley, you need to put that down. My voice trails off. Tears roll down my cheeks and my panicked heart flutters in my chest. I feel dizzy and breathless and terrified all at once, and I'm so tired of feeling that way. Riley, she says again, her voice now coarse, her tone terse. You have no idea what that thing does. It's supposed to fix you. You have no idea what it does. You're just repeating what they said. She grunts and tugs at her restraints again. The fear in her eyes is reflected so clearly, and it kills me. You're trusting some guys who attacked us over me? Really? Do you have any idea what you've done? The terror in her face dissipates for a moment. It's replaced with an icy cold expression. She says in a low whisper, I did what I had to do. I shake my head over and over again. The images of the men's faces flash through my mind, their faces caved in, their skulls a soup of blood and flesh and teeth. We had to protect each other, but not like that. Anything but that. Tigger's barking grows louder and louder outside, reverberating through the air. I take a step towards Aspen and she shrinks, her eyes wide. She stares at me, her mouth gaping open, and then she smirks. Her expression darkens. I take another step forward and she kicks at me. The force of her kick causes us to fall into the floor, and it causes the syringe to fly from my hands. Still tied to the chair, she wriggles in her constraints and aggressively inches over on top of me. I cry out, trying to shove her off, but the weight of my body's exhaustion weakens me. Wordlessly, we scream back and forth at each other, a writhing mess of bloody limbs and tangled hair as we both reach out for the syringe. Day 0, morning. As I anxiously wait for my Pop-Tart to finish its time in the toaster, I pour myself my cup of coffee that morning. I've been up since 5 a.m., and before you ask, no, I'm not a morning person. My overactive fluff boy, Tigger, just needs to go for a walk before I go to school. So every day, except for weekends, then Mom can do it, I take Tigger for a walk on the paths behind her house. It sucks because, everything is freezing in the morning now that it's fall. Snow isn't even on the ground yet, but I think we're going to have an early winter. I have to pile on a sweatshirt, coat, and mittens before I even head out the door. I take a sip of my coffee and then I frown. I smell something odd. It's not the instant coffee grounds. I look in the direction of the toaster and I can see a small trail of smoke stiff up from the slot. The toaster is just one of the many appliances in our old ass house that never works right, but for whatever reason, Mom won't replace it. Grimacing, I set down my mug, rush over, and unplug the toaster. I turn it upside down and shake out the contents of my smoldering Pop Tart onto the plate. A little charred around the edges, but it'll have to do considering that there's nothing else to eat. Lately, Mom's been struggling to find a time to go grocery shopping. I begged her to just pass over the credit card so that I can do it for us. I mean, I can drive to the store after all. I have my truck and everything. But the thing about my mother is that she always insists on making life difficult for others around her. One of the ways in which she has made my life difficult by choosing to move from Oregon to Maine. Divorcing my father last year wasn't enough of dramatic life change for her, I guess. She also had to add uproot my teenage daughter from her friends and family in the middle of her high school career to have an adventure in the backwoods Northeast to that list. If you couldn't tell already, I'm just a little bitter. I grab my plate along with my coffee mug and migrate into the living room where Tigger is sitting on his doggy bed, contentedly tearing at his old reindeer tug toy. He's so absorbed in this that he doesn't even bother to look up at me when I sit down on the couch. Good for me, though, because now I get to eat breakfast without his incessant begging. Tigger is a golden border retriever or a golden retriever border collie mix. He's about 5 years old now, so he's extremely rambunctious. My grandparents got him for me after I made the honor roll in middle school, which may seem like an unjustified huge reward, but if you saw how bad my grades were back then, I mean, you get it, trust me. I tear off a charred chunk of my breakfast and dip it in my mug, which normally I would find quite nasty, but today I'm feeling it. Between studying for chemistry until 11 p.m. and waking up at this ungodly early hour, I feel nothing but nasty. My dark circles are so deep and black I look like a raccoon. Might as well as dumpster dive for a better breakfast. I'd fit in with the other critters, and plus I probably find something that tastes better. I can hear the faint twuck twuck sound of heels on carpet in the next room over. My mom exits her room and walks down the hallway in her ridiculous kitten heels. When we live in the middle of the boonies, I don't quite understand the point in dressing up for work, but personally, I think my mom is the hots for her boss. She repeatedly says that he looks like Tom Selleck, as if that's supposed to mean something to me. Only my mother would get excited over some dude with an 80s porn stash. I never say it to her face, but she has no taste in men. My mother swipes her tongue over her front teeth, trying to remove faint traces of lipstick. Today's shade is Vavavoom Red, and I resist the urge to cringe. She always wears that when she's going out on a date. I told my mother that this is a bit obsessive compulsive. She insists that she's being meticulous. She glides into the kitchen, smooths out some of the wrinkles in her skirt, and pours herself a to-go cup of coffee. Her nose scrunches up in disgust. What smells like smoke? I smirk, holding up my Pop-Tart. My breakfast? Riley, I told you not to use the toaster. Toasters are meant for toasting things that need to be toasted, like Pop-Tarts. She rolls her eyes. Can't you use the microwave? That's blasphemy. Blasphemy or burning down our house? Which do you prefer? She reaches into the fridge and removes a single cheese stick. She jams it in the corner of her mouth as she gathers her things, which are scattered across the kitchen table. Various pieces of makeup, legal pad, pens. Her phone often gets lost in her purse, so she frequently panics and just dumps her stuff out on the table. You know that we could just buy a new toaster, right? She finishes putting her lipstick case in her purse and glares at me. When my mom gives me that look, she always bugs out one of her eyes and pinches the other closed, making it super squinty. When I was a little kid, I called it her wicked witch face. Now that I'm older, I call it something else. I'm not going to drop $50 on a new toaster right now. A toaster does not cost $50, Mom. Sure, if we want to buy a toaster exactly as shitty as the one that we have now, we can buy a new toaster for under $50. She whines a little as she applies more powder to her face. I don't have time for this conversation, Riley. I'm going to be late for work. She walks back into the room only to give Tigger a brief pat on the head and then exits through the kitchen door. I don't even bother to watch her car leave the driveway. I just sit and stew in angry silence. I find it weird how I'm 16 years old and I think I've argued about my mother about money more than anyone else has with their own. And what makes it even stranger is that I'm the one telling her that she's being irresponsible. Who knows how much she spent on moving out here renting this house? I don't know, but I'm getting a little tired of her saying that we don't have money. We were comfortable when we were living in Portland. We had people that we could rely on. Yeah, she had left my father, but was the divorce so bad that she had to run away from everything? It's been 3 months since we moved, and I still don't know why we're here. Worse, I don't know why she dragged me with her. I mean, okay, I know. She's the one who got primary custody. And she claims that she moved out here because an old friend from college offered her a job when she heard about the divorce. As she was boxing up all my things, Mom just kept insisting it was a fresh start. Maybe it is a fresh start for her, but to me, this move represented the end of my social life. Goodbye, vibrant and bustling Portland. Hello, quaint and boring Littlebrook. The most exciting thing that happens here on a Friday night is that a college girl will get too drunk at the ale house and fall off the robot rodeo bowl, which, yes, is a thing that they have here, and it's just as stupid and tacky as it sounds. Even worse, that a lot of the town's nightlife revolves around that dang thing. After finishing breakfast, I shower, get dressed, and bike to school. I would drive my truck, but my mom says that she'd prefer for me to not drive as much. Even though I got my license in August before we left for Maine, she insists that since I'm a new driver and it's a new town, that it's too dangerous for me to go out by myself too often. She prefers that I bike around in the near dark during a rainstorm because somehow that's supposed to be safer. Mom logic. Littlebrook is small, so there aren't too many different routes to take to school. Normally, I just head south on our street, hanging a right at the end of the road, and keep pedaling until I reach the high hill the school rests upon. Some mornings, if I'm running late, I'll cut over to Main Street so I can grab a coffee and a breakfast sandwich from the local coffee shop, Cup of Joe's. Or if I got a little extra time, I'll get some lunch from Chow Cat Pub House. For as small and dumb as this town is, I have to admit they have good food here. The first time I tried a lobster roll, I almost cried. Today, I'm neither late nor early, but I don't stop because it seems like the restaurants are already packed. I watch as men and women in lab coats and mud boots waddle in and out of places, carrying steaming bags of food. These people all work for Titan Technologies headquarters, which is pretty much the whole reason Littlebrook's exist. My mom even works there. She does data entry or something. It's kind of hard to believe that such a small town would be the headquarters of a major science conglomerate, but stranger things have happened. Like Walmart is headquartered in Bentonville, Alabama. Pretty freaking random, right? The road that leads to the school heads up a steep incline and is surrounded by tons of lush green trees and bushes. Although it's annoying to have to bike every day, the ride gives me some of my favorite views of this town. There's a small creek that branches up the Allagash and cuts through the wilderness that surrounds our town. When you bike along the road, you can just see it shimmering through the trees, softly reflecting the light that cascades down. My classmates have mentioned going swimming there a couple times, but I haven't been yet. A couple yellow buses are dropping off some of my classmates who congregate out on the school's front lawn. I pull up outside the front doors and lock my bike to the rack before hearing a buzzing noise. I fumble inside my backpack and check my phone. It's a text message from Mom. Mom, sorry for being a PETA this morning. PETA, Mom's abbreviated way of saying pain in the ass. I smirk but don't text her back. I can see the three little dots dance across the message signs. She's the world's slowest texter, which is funny because all she does is type all day, right? Isn't that what data entry is basically? Mom, I'll be out late tonight. Gotta work on something with Miles. Love you. Have a great day. Miles is my mom's boss. I think back to the lipstick that I saw her wearing this morning. Ah, so I had been right. Except she's still lying and is trying to pass it off like it really is work. I roll my eyes and stare down at the screen, trying to think about what to message back. But when the bell rings, I pocket my phone and leave her on read. And yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. My name is Melodie Romeo, and I write under the pen name Adele Lane, primarily historical fiction, romance, historical fantasy, female-female relationships. And today my reading is from Heart of Sherwood by Adele Lane. This passage occurs when Robin comes to visit her lifelong friend Marion for the first time since tragedy struck. For a moment, it was as if there was no one else in the world. No war, no sheriff, no loss. Just Robin and Marion, and whatever was between them. In that instant, Robin reasoned she could let it all go. If she and Marion ran away together, left everything behind, that would be fine by her. Just for a twinkling, her world became everything she had hoped for. I can give you some money to buy food for them, Marion offered as she continued to massage her fingers through Robin's silky strands. But it would only be a temporary remedy. And there was reality smashing the dream. Robin had stopped running. She had determined to take a stand and do right by her people. Your charity is greatly appreciated, but I need your ideas, Robin said, snapping back to the moment as Marion reached for the shears. You always come up with the best schemes, the grandest pranks, and each one greater success than the last. Well, you shall have my donation, Marion confirmed. Come to think of it, I know quite a few nobles and merchants in these parts with deep pockets who could easily contribute to the cause. Why, we could feed your refugees for months and not even miss the coin. A look of dismay returned to Robin's face. Like I'd convince any of them to be charitable? Well, Robin recognized the tone of Marion's voice at once. Admit she had a devilishly clever plan in mind. Brightness gleamed in Marion's intelligent eyes, and a grin tugged at the bow of her lips. The shears went about their cutting, and a woman's crown of glory fell unceremoniously to the floor. Your band of outlaws, some swords, some bows, may convince them to part with their purses. And then the spark passed from Marion to Robin. Are you suggesting that we rob the rich to feed the poor? She couldn't quite help the grin on her face as she said the words. It's not like they'll miss any meals. and I'm sure you can make better use of their excess blunt than they could. But you had better hurry, she added seriously, snipping the last bits of Robin's hair. Prince John is traveling about raising more taxes. Queen Eleanor has raised two-thirds of the ransom from her holdings on the continent, but without the remaining portion, she cannot secure the king's release. So you will need to hit them before the tax man does. And Sir Guy? Robin asked, narrowing her brow. She raised her chin, bringing her eyes to catch Marian's. Sir Guy has recently lost his wife and is in search of a replacement. He seems to believe that I will suffice, but I assure you, I have no intention of accepting a marriage proposal from him or anyone for that matter until my father returns home. Robin let out a sigh of relief, joy beaming in her eyes and her soul at the certainty she was right. There was nothing to this rumor about Sir Guy. Then Marian took her by the hand and led her to a large looking glass. She stood beside her, showing off the results of the haircut. Robin was rightly impressed. I even look like a boy to me. Marian laid her head on Robin's shoulder, reaching one arm around her waist, gazing at the reflections. As Robin peered into the mirror, she thought of what a lovely couple they made and how, if things were different, they could be together. She realized she yearned for that more than ever in her life, even as she inwardly quivered. Then Marian continued, but I must consider marriage. After all, I will turn 20 in December. Most maids our age are already wed. People are saying, Marian thinks she is too good for anyone. How vain she is, and no man meets her expectations. Bollocks, Robin uttered darkly, and like a mist, her dream disappeared. With the likes of Gifford and Gisborne to choose from, a nunnery sounds like a fine idea. I doubt either of us could survive a nunnery, she said as she continued to linger at Robin's side, staring at the two of them in the looking glass. We both love our freedom too much for that. And what of you? You turned 22 in May. She remembered my birthday, Robin thought, and smiled a little despite herself. I think I have just laid that question to rest, she replied as she scrutinized the face, hair, and dress of the page boy in the mirror. I wish I had options, Marian said gravely and lowered her chin, casting her eyes to the floor. Of course she has options, thought Robin. She could do whatever she wants. Then, without letting her brain have time to register the words, she blurted out in a playful manner, well, you can always come live in the forest with me and the outlaws. She meant it to sound like a joke, but in her heart she longed for nothing more. Oh, Robin, Marian let out a disappointed sigh. Her hands dropped to her side and she stepped away, glancing around her room as she spoke. It was completely light by then. I have responsibilities. I have my family and my station to consider. Marian avoided eye contact as she spoke. Robin turned from the looking glass, her head lowered in regret at her own lost family. In that instant, Marian turned to Robin, stepped close, and reached a hand to caress her cheek. Gently, she guided Robin's chin so that their eyes met. I am so sorry, she began with heartfelt tenderness. I didn't mean. Do not fret, Robin replied. I know what you meant. She lifted a hand up to stroke Marian's wet rested on her cheek. Anyway, I'm getting used to being alone now. Naturally, you have obligations to your family. They expect to arrange a fine marriage for you with a young man from a noble house. No, Robin, Marian corrected her. She interlaced her fingers with Robin's, which were already becoming rough from manual labor. Then she peered through Robin's eyes straight into her soul and stated with absolute authority, you are not alone. You are never alone. You will always have me. Marian stretched up and kissed her cheek. A moment passed between them, and Robin wondered if Marian felt what she felt, the energy, the passion. The room was so silent, Robin could hear the pulsing of both their hearts. But before another word could pass between them, there came a frantic knock pounding at the door. Marian, come quick, sounded a high-pitched, frantic voice. Hearing footsteps in the hallway, Marian made a shooing motion with her hand and placed her finger to her lips as Robin backed herself against the wall behind the ingress. Marian opened the oak door just a crack and peeked out to a squat, middle-aged woman with a round face, bug eyes, and a button nose, wearing a servant's apron and cap, who nervously rocked from one foot to the other, a handkerchief gripped between two clenched hands. Whatever is the matter, Anna? I knew you to be an early riser, mistress, so I came to your door first, she explained with an acute look of distress. Yes, well, what is it? An emergency. The deputy is here with some soldiers to collect young Charles. They say he is to hang. At that point, she burst into tears, blubbering into the handkerchief she had wound so tight in her hands, and Marion knew gleaning further information from the servant was futile. Go tell them I will be there straight away to sort things out, instructed. I just have to dress. Then she shut the door, latched it, and glanced at Robin with concern. Honestly, she muttered while rummaging through her wardrobe for the first day dress she could find. She slipped it on over her night shift without bothering with underclothes. If the sheriff wants to play these games, can't he at least wait until a decent hour of the morning to begin? How can I help? Robin asked in a hushed voice. They both knew Robin couldn't be found in Marion's rooms. I'll handle this, Marion replied as she pulled up her stockings and slipped her feet into her shoes. When they think they can come onto our estate and snatch one of our mere boys to hang without our knowledge or consent, they have gone too far. What is the point of being noble if you do not have rights? With a stern, impassive frown, Marion fastened a cord around her waist that held her coin pouch and a ring of keys. Stay in here and hide, she quietly commanded, pinning Robin with her gaze. If the deputy was to find you were here, it would be more than Charles's neck on the line. Robin gave a silent nod, and Marion scurried out the door where she met her mother and 14-year-old brother Richard. Inside Marion's bedchamber, Robin slid to the floor where she wrapped her arms around her knees and lay her forehead on them, buried in thought. How can I sit here while that vile sheriff's men want to cart off a little boy to hang for no good reason, I'm sure? But if I go and they discover my identity, then I will hang. Oh Lord, who am I? She agonized. Confused, frustrated, and lost, Robin pondered her life and her future. Then, as if carried on a breeze, a still, calm voice spoke to her. It wasn't an audible sound, but more of a stirring from somewhere within her own soul. Who do you want to be? Who do I want to be? She pondered the thought. I've just committed to being Robin Hood, so the real question becomes, who is Robin Hood? She had raised her head, placing her chin on her pulled up knees, and contemplated. Not merely a thief or an outlaw. No. Robin Hood is brave and chivalrous, a crusader for justice who fights for the poor and downtrodden. He brings hope to the hopeless. Robin Hood is more than a person. He's an idea. The idea that we can be more than we are, that we can be better than we ever imagined, that we can rise out of our circumstances, accomplish something great. That is who I want to be. Again, she perceived that inner voice speak with conviction to her soul. So, what's stopping you?
That was nice.
Thank you.
My reading is from my most recent book in the Dali Tamarea series. It's called Peacemaker. And this scene takes place after a very serious screw up in a mission. So I took a quick turn in the cleanser to rid my skin and hair of the tacky residue left by the decon spray. In the warmth and vibration, I shuddered as the physical characteristics I'd adapted to pass as male shifted me back into my neutral, sexless state. My crewmates didn't expect me to assume a gender, something for which I remain grateful. Without hormone stimulation to drive the change, the process was more painful, and my shoulders complained against the grind of bone and muscle. I tamed my wavy brown mop as best I could, drying it into a short braided queue at the back of my neck before putting on the dress black uniform hanging in my quarters. The white starburst of diplomacy blazed in holographic relief on my left shoulder, with the multi-armed spiral of the Romoliad sigil on the opposite sleeve. To be back in the uniform of an ambassador felt strange. Transient reflections in the narrow window showed a me I hadn't acknowledged in over 2 years. I barely recognized the echo of who I used to be, a transparent ghost against the stars outside. The reason I'd been pulled out of the field began to make sense, though I still didn't know what the assignment entailed. Time to find out. At the closed door of Sumner's ready room, I tugged at the tunic's high collar, squared my shoulders, and tapped on the panel to request entry. Commander, permission to enter? Granted. The door slid aside with his verbal acknowledgement. I stepped through. Silhouetted by the flicker of busy data screens behind the desk, Sumner wore a black uniform with insignias of diplomatic service similar to mine, but without the starburst rank of ambassador. Instead, he wore the pips of an officer in the Romoliad fleet on the high neck of his collar. He stared at the screen of a PDD, his expression dark and troubled. Sumner glanced up and a crooked grin formed on his lips as he rose. Ambassador Tamarea, I haven't seen you in a while. His vocal inflections sounded almost normal, but his eyes still held frost. We were never this formal with each other, a sign of the tension between us. I haven't seen me in a long time either. It feels very strange. I took a deep breath. I would like to apologize for my insubordination, especially for what I said in medbay, Commander. I was out of line. Embarrassment burned in my cheeks and I lowered my gaze. I owe Milos and Ziggy more than an apology. I was under the influence on a mission. I put the lives of my teammates in danger. I will accept the consequences of my action as you deem appropriate. Grab a chair. He gestured opposite his desk and I sat. I think I owe you an apology as well. I've gotten used to autonomy. When some bureaucrat tells me to drop whatever I'm doing and pull my operatives in the middle of a potentially productive mission, it pisses me off. The order to recall you came from so far over my head, I got vertigo. The rest is just the frost on the comet, and it pushed me over the line. He cleared his throat. I am sorry for the vendetta remark. No, you were right. I needed to be reminded why I'm here. You promised only that I'll be involved when we take them down, not that I would be the instrument. No matter how badly I wanted the privilege, I had a bigger job to do. Who told you to recall me? His mouth twisted in an ironic smile. The Romoliad Security Council. My eyebrows threatened to merge with my hairline. The Security Council has authority over the penumbra? Technically, my superior answers to the Secretary General, but it's almost unheard of to receive a direct order from any office. I don't understand. I frowned. Did my mother have anything to do with this? No, Ambassador Urquhart isn't involved as far as we can tell. We checked since the order was so specific, but I just received more details. He handed me the data device he'd been scowling at when I came in. Against all previous declarations of disdain for Galactic Alliance, the Ursetu recently issued an emergency petition for their planet to become a member of the Romoliad. I narrowed my eyes at him and took the PDD. I saw something about that in my debriefing file. The Crown Princess is dead? Yes, the Queen and her grandson, Prince Razaxa, are still alive. What happened? Was the planet attacked? Yes and no. He swept his hand and the heads-up display swirled into view between us. I warn you up front, this is brutal. The wreck of some immense ship blighted the forest grounds of a ziggurat-like palace, silhouetted against the backdrop of a sharp black mountain. Columns of smoke and flames traced the outline of warped and twisted debris. The recording lens zoomed in on a section of the disaster where tiny flashes of light sparked and died. As the picture enlarged, I sat forward in shock. Enhance this area. Sumner circled the spot on the heads up and spread his fingers. The portion of the hull of it expanded, grainy, blurred, and blocked by foliage, but I made it out plainly enough. Enormous gray-skinned figures piled out of the wreckage. Shantavians. The four-armed beings appeared unstoppable as they swatted aside the Ursetu and their guns, snatched up the soldiers with their sharp-taloned hands, and a psychic memory of the taste of blood and entrails hit me so hard I fought the urge to vomit. Stop the playback. I drew heavy breaths through my nose until the nausea passed. My heart stopped pounding. Sumner swept his hand over the enlarged hollow, reducing details to a safe distance as my mind attempted to process what I'd seen. A ship hadn't crashed in the middle of the Ursetu city. It was the orbiting laboratory where Shantavians were engineered and kept isolated until their sale to whomever bought their mercenary services. It crashed into the planet or was deliberately brought down. By whom? The Ursetu faced monsters of their own making. Huge, intelligent creatures with the serrated teeth and claws of a predator created solely for fighting wars. And they had a craving for sentient meat.
Mm.
Cool.
Ooh.
So, do we have questions?
Looks like we got a couple in the Q&A.
Let's see. Melodie, is there a story behind the Adele Lane pen name?
Well, I had been writing for a number of years under my name, but they were all like straight fiction and more dark, more oriented. And so when I started writing lesbian romance, I thought I didn't want to confuse my readers. So I would create a pen name. And actually, my middle name is Elaine, and my partner's middle name is Dale. So I just kind of interconnected those names to come up with Adele Lane.
Cool.
Cool.
And I run under a pen name too. My last name is actually Hamill reversed, so just to make a little bit of difference. So let's see. Scott says, I love the crew doesn't care what gender the main character identifies as or doesn't at any given moment. Does this bit come from personal experience, i.e., how does your own gender expression factor into the character's story? Yeah, I prefer, pretty much genderless clothing. I'm constantly in t-shirts and sweatshirts and things like that. But yeah, at work, I always had to, dress up, business casual, that kind of thing. So it was always, at the time when I was working in the corporate life, that was an issue for me sometimes because I hated wearing dresses and skirts and high heels and awful. But now I'm a nurse and I can wear scrubs all day. So yeah. So scrubs are, I picked the perfect job. I can wear pajamas to work basically. So let's see. Questions. What are you most excited about writing right now?
Yeah, so I'm polishing up this FF historical fantasy called Viking Quest.
Ooh.
And it's got sea monsters and battles and voyages through storms and all that kind of exciting stuff.
I'm kind of like going back and forth between writing Monster Sona, which I read today, but also writing the sequel to Duality, which is called Directionality. So trying to work on both of those at the same time can be a little bit complicated.
That had a heck of a battle scene at the beginning. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm working on the third book in the Dali Tamarea series. It's called Third Front. So
cool.
That's what I'm writing right now.
Cool.
All right. Let's see, here we have, for Lisa, did you draw upon any specific earth biology when creating the Shantovians?
Oh, honestly, I tend to be kind of influenced by things that I watch. The Shantavians in my head kind of look like Captain Gantu from Stitch.
Oh,
except they have four arms, kind of that kind of physiology, very large, very kind of dome shaped head, dark eyes. But yeah, as far as Earth, they are actually, in the book, you find out that they are mostly genetically engineered from a kind of ape-like life form on Ursetu. That they're four-armed arboreal creatures and ground foraging creatures. So that does make sense, but there's a little twist in there as well. So about their biology.
Okay. Somebody's asking, did I ever pause to rework such a huge body of lore for Heart of Sherwood? I'd be daunted by the heavy traditions. Well, I did an extensive amount of research. Went back to the very earliest Robin Hood stories, which were only like a couple of centuries after the time period that it supposedly occurred, and went through every movie ever done, and gleaned bits and pieces from all of the different lore and stories and retellings and put them together into what I think is the most complete and historically accurate version of Robin Hood existing today, with the slight exception of my Robin being a woman instead of a man.
I love that twist. That's cool.
So cool.
Thanks.
On So I don't see any other questions at the moment, but Chloe, I had a question about yours. What was your inspiration for the monster book?
Ooh.
Yeah, I think it was actually I had been getting into a lot of work in kind of like a separate side project that actually was focused on like examining sort of the lore of King Kong. And King Kong, like the original films and things like that, and the video games. And so while I was doing research for that franchise, I started to think about kind of this idea of I was wondering about kind of the idea of like having a giant monster, like a giant person. And I was kind of like, and there was also like that thing that happened with the Resident Evil game. The latest Resident Evil game like released its trailer with like the giant lady, and I was kind of thinking, I don't think I've ever read a book that necessarily had something about a girl who turned into a giant, like 20-foot tall, like 50-foot tall monster that could like decimate cities. And so I thought, well, wouldn't that be kind of interesting to examine why she is a monster, how she became a monster, if she's actually truly human, and then exactly what sort, how does she kind of like balance being a monster with being like an everyday girl. So Riley, who is the main character, she's actually not the monster, but Aspen, the other girl, is. Riley is kind of this person that has to accompany her on this journey across the United States when Aspen destroys the city. And Riley kind of has to kind of learn a little bit more about herself, and she also has to kind of learn about how to be, I guess, more of a supportive friend. Since she's so far away from her friends, she's kind of a snarky person, kind of like very self-absorbed. So I was interested in kind of exploring that dynamic of like the things that would pressure you, I guess, to become a better person, especially when you're so low on time. Yeah.
And there's a question. And there's a question down here for Melodie. You mentioned yesterday that you're a trucker. What's it like to be a writer on the road? Strikes Scott as very Melodie Kerouac. So.
and no, I would not like to road trip with Chloe's Monster Girl.
No.
There's just not room in an 8x8 cab for that. Well, it is quite an interesting adventure. Being an over-the-road truck driver has all of its own challenges. It can be an extremely boring job. It can also be an extremely dangerous job. People get killed doing it all the time. But I'm a good driver, so I don't have to worry about that. I fill those boring moments with creating the ideas in my head. And then when I get parked, I try to get them typed up. Some days, I just, 14-hour days, I just don't have time to beat. But other days, I'm sitting for 8 hours waiting for them to put box by box on the truck as slowly as they possibly can, taking their little breaks every half hour for a half hour. And so I get a lot done on those days. But it's interesting because I do get to see a lot of places, have a lot of perspective, get some nice scenes from those different climes and sceneries and stuff. Because I traveled all over the U.S.
That's cool. See, any other questions I've missed so far?
I think we have.
I don't think so.
Right.
Whoa. I'm sorry. I'm being attacked from below. This is
Oh,
Aries.
no.
Aries, dog of war.
Oh,
So,
I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
let's see. Kristen. She says, for me, I love the world building. What are some of the challenges and some of the things you love about writing science fiction? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Challenges. I'm pretty picky about realism as far as I want to make sure that my science fiction world has a basis in science, that it's plausible and it's not just completely, off the wall. So with my ships, I studied a lot of stuff with, like faster than light travel. I studied planetary atmospheres of the different planets in our solar system, and then made up a completely new one or two. I love that part, just that there's no limitation on where your imagination can take you with science fiction. It's, somewhere in the galaxy, and it's a huge place. There are these, fuzzy blue creatures that are highly empathic, and there's big four-armed mercenaries, so somewhere there, I have to believe they exist, and I want to make sure that it's realistic enough that they do. So yeah, challenges are just for me making sure that it's all plausible and tying all of my plot points together with science, so that it doesn't seem
Yeah.
completely off the wall.
Right.
And Chloe,
Yeah,
Scott has a question there. Yeah.
Yeah, so what books of yours would you recommend that we read first, and why? I would definitely say read my novel Duality first, just because that's going to be the first in a trilogy. And I think that that book kind of, it is my first novel, yes, but it also kind of sets the precedent for what kind of stories and what kind of protagonists I like to explore. The protagonist of Duality is bisexual, and she is kind of a jerk. And I like kind of exploring protagonists that are a little bit problematic, and you have to kind of like work with them to get them to be a better get to a better place and be a better person. So I really, that's kind of what also I'm trying to do with Monster Sona. Like, we've got Riley is a very, very snarky character, and Kat in Duality I think is just very self-absorbed and like selfish, because she's just going through so many difficulties at that point in her life. So I would say that definitely Duality is an interesting read, and I think it would be most enjoyable for people in comparison to the other novellas that I've written.
Well, I would suggest that readers start out with Merchants of Milan, book one of the Night Flyer trilogy, because that way you get the other two books. And I've actually started writing a fourth one in the series because the fans are like, don't stop, don't stop. So I'm excited about that. And
the very first book in the Dali Tamarajan missions book series is Dali. So the books kind of stand alone as far as story wise. There is an overarching plot, but each one wraps up. So it's, if you start with one, you can go back and read the other, and it's not completely confusing, but it always helps to read them in order. And if you don't like science fiction, I do have an urban fantasy called Nectar and Ambrosia, which is completely different. So really very snarky and a lot of fun. So
Looks like we got another question in the chat here. Chloe, Melody, what are the things that you love about writing in your genres? I would say that for me, the thing that I love most about science fiction is just the number of possibilities that you can use. And I feel like, yes, in fantasy there are possibilities as well, but with science fiction it kind of forces you, I think, to look a little bit more towards the future. And I think that science fiction can be, you can explore like dystopias and things like that, but I think that since you spend so much time looking towards the future and different technologies that you can use, I think it is like a little bit more of a hopeful genre, something that can mirror and parallel our own realities now, but hopefully you can improve upon it and kind of demonstrate how people can band together to sort of survive an uncertain world. So I think that that's what I love most about the sci-fi genre.
well, I have a master's degree in history. I love history. I'm very interested in it. And I have discovered that what most people think history is just old stuff that happened a long time ago that doesn't really have any relevance. The fact is that people that lived in previous centuries and generations really weren't all that different than we are. And they had the same wants and needs, the same desires, the same fears that we do. They just didn't have our technology. And I find it very interesting to create characters and put them in a time and setting and make it as real as it could be and still speak to people today. And I think we can definitely learn from both the mistakes and successes of our past.
that's the whole thing about writing genre fiction, is you have to make sure that you're writing about people, even if they are aliens, so that we can connect with them. I think that's having a human story, even in an inhuman sort of way, allows people to really empathize with the characters that you write.
Yeah.
And even historically, I mean, we forget that they were, like you said, just living, breathing human beings. They were exactly like we were, except they just didn't have our privileges and technologies. And
where can we find your work? Chloe, do you want to start?
Yeah, you can find my work on my website. I have links to all different types of my work on my website. I can drop it here in the chat. Most of my books are available. You can get it through the publisher, JMS Books. That's where I publish Duality with. You can also just go to Amazon and you can search Duality Chloe Spencer, and you should be able to pull up Duality. And if you click on my name, of course, you'll get linked to my Amazon author page where you can see like everything that I've written and contributed to. Yeah, so, and on my website, I do other things as well. I'm a filmmaker. I'm actually currently a graduate student that's working on my thesis film right now. So you can also follow kind of updates on like the films that I make. And I'm also a game developer. So I make RPGs, LGBT inclusive RPGs. So you can also follow me there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you can look up Adele Lane on Amazon. Got an off page. Past and Prologue Press is my publishing company, which I also kind of just developed to have published through my own company, Past and Prologue Press. I'm on Goodreads, BookBub. Look up Melodie Romeo on Facebook, Adele Lane on Twitter, and just pop my name in a Google search, and all kinds of book stuff will come up. So.
See, mine can be found on the 9-Star Press website. I am also on most of the major online retailers. I have a couple of things out on Kindle Unlimited. And that's about it.
Got posted, not a question, but I loved all of your readings. So different, but all empowering, even Chloe's nonsense. Come back next year? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. Well, I guess we'll be continuing over in Discord.
The Discord?
Yeah.
Yep. I'll be there if anyone wants to pop in and say hello.
All righty.
Awesome.